Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 267 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is learning and growing. Our quote of the day comes to us from Malcolm X. Growing is a result of learning. I'm really looking forward to today's episode. I was introduced to today's guest by one of my closest friends, Fred Quarterbaum. Matt Doherty speaks with such honesty about how getting fired from the University of North Carolina led to him becoming the best version of himself. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Matt, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thank you very much. Glad to be on it with you, Chris.
I appreciate it. So the first question to ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
Always, man.
So the number one objective of our show is to both motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you yourself either have a no-quit story of your own or perhaps a really challenging time that you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Yeah, I think we all do. I think we all get tested. And if you're not tested, you're not going to be able to grow. You grow outside of your comfort zone. I've done a lot of work under John Maxwell, and that's one of his favorite quotes is, you grow at the end of your comfort zone, and to stay in your comfort zone is not living, in my opinion. I think that, I quit my job in New York, moved to Charlotte, thought I was going to get in the real estate business, got into coaching and started my coaching cycle and dealt with failure. I was the head coach at North Carolina. I was the national coach of the year in 2001, 2003. I was forced to resign. So it really put me on a leadership journey and made me learn and grow because I was definitely out of my comfort zone at that point. So I think, not giving up, learning from failures, failing forward. One of my favorite quotes is from Nelson Mandela, and he talks about, I never lose. I either win or I learn. And I think that's the mindset that I try to have. From a physical thing, at North Carolina, Chris, we had a mile test that you had every fall before practice started. And as a freshman, your mile time was tougher than the seniors because Coach Smith wanted to make it tougher for the freshmen. And I ran pretty hard. So he gave me a mile time of 5 minutes that I had to make to get out of sprints at the start of practice, and you also, a little perk, you get dessert at the first team meal. So I didn't really know how to run a mile. And so I ran the first lap in 60 seconds and then the second lap in like 70, and the monkey jumped on my back on the third lap. And then, I could have quit. And then the fourth lap, I gutted it out and dove across the finish line and made a 5-minute mile. And, those are the gut tests that come in your life from an athletic standpoint, and then there are the other ones that come in your life in a form of life, whether it be a family crisis or a career crisis.
It's interesting. When I played college basketball myself, we had, as a guard, we had to do 2 miles in 12 minutes or under, and our reward was once we did it, we were done, and if we didn't do it, we had to do it every single day after preseason practice. So the reality is, obviously, after a 2-hour practice, there's no way you're doing it. So a bunch of us just basically looked at each other and said, we're going to sprint the heck out of this for the next 4 laps. And if we die after, we die after. But there's only one chance we can do it now.
Yeah. So that was a good decision. Good decision. Yeah.
So I wanted to just ask if you wouldn't mind just telling our listeners a little bit about what you're doing today.
Sure. Chris, I started a leadership practice. I call it a practice because leadership needs to be practiced. Just like you want to practice your golf swing, you want to practice your free throws, you got to practice leadership on a regular basis. And it's good to have a coach, just like it's good to have a swing coach in golf. So I've done that. Once I went on my leadership journey, I realized that there's such a lack of formal leadership training in the business world. definitely in the athletic world. So I do that. I'm also involved in the CBD business, the hemp oil, which to me has helped me immensely with my physical ailments, especially on the golf course. So I'm involved in those two things. I also do some radio in Charlotte at WBT and WFNZ, and work a little bit with the ACC Network calling ACC basketball games. So I stay busy. I enjoy it, and no days like the other.
No, that's awesome. You definitely have a ton of things going on, which I think is interesting because I feel that some of the most successful people that I know are looking to always try different things and get themselves involved in, to your point, always trying to practice whatever it is. And obviously, you have your leadership practice, and the reality is to be good at what you do, to be great at what you do, you have to continually not only practice but be open to learn and learn different things.
Yeah, well, my motto with my company is learn and grow. And I think that when I was studying leadership after I got let go at UNC, I worked with this executive coach, and I'd meet with her once a week, once a month in Philadelphia. I'd fly from Charlotte to Philadelphia. And at one point, you said, you're a lifelong learner. And this was in 2003. I never heard that term before. And obviously took it as a compliment because I do like to learn. Um, I always like to ask probing questions, and I get stimulated from ideas from other people, and so it's fun. It's fun to learn from others.
So, I wanted to get your perspective on something. You talked about your departure from North Carolina, and I was curious, how have you addressed failure in both your personal and professional life, and how have you taken whatever you've learned and become better?
Well, I think the thing about athletics is um, you deal with failure on a consistent basis. You deal with it in a public environment. After a game, everyone knows whether you won or lost. It was in the newspaper. It's on the internet. Your stats are there, and you have it filmed. So after losses and after wins, you still have to learn after wins. Sometimes win can mask um, some of your flaws. So you have to do an honest appraisal after a win and a loss. It's obviously you're more critical after a loss, and you got to fight that from victory too. So, um, as a coach, I lost. I lost my job. So okay, I want to get better. How can I get better? So I aligned myself with some people in the leadership business. I did some 360 assessments from people that I work with. Those things came back, and some of them were, a punch in the gut. I took some leadership courses at Darden. I took some leadership courses at Wharton. And I remember sitting in those classes, and I said, if I would have taken these leadership classes before I was a head coach, I might still be the head coach at North Carolina. And that's what put me on this leadership journey, because there's so much out there to learn and then put into practice. So I wanted to try to coach again, to put some of these things back into practice. And so I took a job at Florida Atlantic University. Then I went to SMU, and, try to get better and apply some of these tools that were now in my toolbox. I took, I before I just had the hammer in the toolbox, and now I put a pair of pliers and a screwdriver in there.
I have to just commend you in the sense of, I think most coaches, and there have been so many coaches out there, as a head coach, you lose a job, whether it's being fired or you're resigning, and ultimately a lot of them never become head coaches again. Now, obviously, many of them do, but the reality is, you said something really interesting. You said you made a decision to get better. You took some of those 360 assessments and you went ahead and you learned. And I think that's the biggest part, and that's the best part about what you just shared, is you took ownership to that and you became a better, not only version of yourself, but ultimately you became a better coach.
Well, I hope I did. I think you have a choice. You can become bitter or better. I chose to become better. And a friend of mine who's the AD at Duke, Kevin White, he was the AD when I left Notre Dame. He was one of the first people to call me after I resigned North Carolina, and he said, take the high road. There's less traffic up there, and so I try to do that. But yet I'm human. There are times where you get angry, you get bitter, and you have to try to fight it. And I also think it also was an opportunity, Chris, for me develop a better relationship with God. I'm not afraid to say that I'm a Christian. I think more of us need to own that. And you're like, okay, God, why? Why me? Right? We people go through that all the time, and generally it has to do with life-threatening situations, but some career situations. Why me? Why? And you don't really know, because you have to trust Him that He's putting you on this different path, and He's got something in store for you that was not in your original plans. But we learn that we make plans and God laughs. So maybe He felt that I was getting too much too soon. Maybe He felt I needed to become closer to my family. Who knows? Maybe He felt that by me preaching about leadership, I can help more people than by coaching. I have no idea. That's why they call it faith.
It's interesting that you touched on a lot of those perspectives, but one of the quotes that you said is something that I don't know who actually originated, but it's the choice of being bitter versus better. And I think the reality is we all choose bitter in some ways. You have those tough losses, those tough things that happen to you, but ultimately, whether that's a day, a week, a month, you have to make a decision to go ahead, and obviously you did. And I think whether it's your faith, whether it's your family, the reality is you went ahead and you put the work in, which I think is interesting, and ultimately you became a better person. I want to ask you an interesting question we ask everybody is, if you had to define yourself, but you could only use one word, what word would you pick?
Oh gosh, that's good. I'd probably put curious.
I think just what you said about taking classes at Wharton and doing other stuff, obviously, I think that defines you pretty accurately.
Thank you.
So, interesting follow-up question to that is, if you could go back to the 20-year-old version of yourself and give yourself one piece of advice, knowing what you know now, what would it be?
Save your money. Respect money. I think because at that age, I probably thought I was going to make more and more every year. And I should have, I saved money, but I could have always saved more. You buy things and you look back like, I didn't need that. So, the wastefulness of money, I think that probably be one of the key pieces of advice.
If I had the ability to give you dinner with anyone, dead or alive, and you could pick absolutely anybody, who would you pick and why?
Well, I think Jesus would be up there. Uh, you know, um, like to see the holes in his hands, and hey, how'd you move that rock? Um, what was it like climbing a mountain with the cross on your back and people whipping you? And then how can you find the heart to forgive those that crucified you? Like I talk about forgiveness a lot. I think forgiveness is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I think you've got to forgive others, but you also have to forgive yourself. And that's not an easy thing to do. And Jesus was on the cross and he forgave the people that crucified him. And he said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And the grace that he has is so powerful. So I think that that would be one person. Oh, another person. Sometimes I don't know if I want to meet some people, because I've met some people, and you build these people up in your mind, and a lot of times they fail you. You get let down by the real person. So, there was a couple people that I would have had in my foursome or at dinner, and that I've met and I've been disappointed in. So I don't know if I don't know. I don't know if I'd care to have those encounters. And that sounds kind of weird, but that's kind of how I feel.
No, I think it does not sound weird based on the fact that you've had some opportunities to meet some of those people. And I think, just going back to what you said about a very powerful word, forgiveness, and I think you touched on something that was so key, is not only is it important to forgive others, but I think ultimately you also have to forgive yourself. And it doesn't mean you take away ownership, but what I think it is it allows you to move forward. And I think what you touched on was really important. So thank you for touching on that.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm interested in your answer because of the fact that you are a lifelong learner. And one of the questions we always ask each guest, if they're reading something currently, or perhaps you've read something recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Whoa, yeah, I keep a list of books because I think that there was a line that um, your life is impacted by the people you meet and the books you read, and
Yes.
that you've got to continue to read and meet new people. And so I'm a big I buy a lot of books on iPad, and I was just given another book to buy. I like audiobooks because I actually don't like to read. I mean, it like I'd rather listen, and I'm in the car a lot, so it's easier to listen um, than it is to sit down and read. If I'm sitting down, I'm generally trying to watch a basketball game or checking emails or doing something like that. So I listen to a lot of books, um, and I like a different. There's all kinds of books that I've read that are kind of fascinating. One of the more fascinating books was The Tattooist of Auschwitz, and it's about concentration camps. And like you think like you got it bad, or you think you're a tough guy. I don't know if I could have survived a concentration camp, and it's a pretty interesting story about a man who had to tattoo the prisoners, and how he fell in love with one, and just everything that they went through and how they were treated. That's a good book. I've read Range was a good book by David Epstein, um, and I think that talked about people with a wide range of experiences. Sometimes the benefit of that, like sometimes, like I've done a lot of different things. Worked on Wall Street. I've been an assistant coach. I've been a head coach. I've worked in the NBA. I've been in the front office of the Atlantic 10. And sometimes you're like, wow, I don't, I've got a lot of different experiences, but maybe I don't have a deep, I say my river runs wide and not really deep, but it runs deep in the leadership in the basketball area. Um, but sometimes there's benefits to that because you can take something from one industry and apply it to another and bring a fresh perspective. So, um, then the books, that I've always enjoyed. The Art of Emotional Intelligence was a great book that I studied at Wharton. And it was an executive class. It wasn't a MBA program, but I didn't know anything about emotional intelligence in 2003, and that really opened my eyes. Um, so I'm giving you a bunch of books, and but I really, you know, there's a lot of different books that are out there that are Boys in a Boat, The Wizard of Odds, Shoe Dog. Um, there's a lot of different books.
You get an A plus. Most people provide one or two books, and you gave quite a few, so I appreciate that. So one of the things that I've always interested in is the word accountability, and we have a clothing line, and on the back of all of our stuff is hashtag accountability. And I was curious, what does the word accountability mean to you?
Well, I think it's basically do what you say you were going to do, and sometimes that's implied, like when you sign up for a team, like when you get a scholarship. You have an accountability to go to class, get your education, show up in time for practice, be in shape, do the right things off the court, and now be held accountable to that. And then so and then just under promise and over deliver. If you say you're going to do something, do it. It's not hard. Like I don't get when people say, "Hey, I'm going to call you. Let's go to lunch," and they never do. Or call me. Let's go to dinner. And you call them, and then they don't return your call, or they don't work it out. Like, don't say it then. Like, you don't have to say it. I'm very literal, and that gets me in trouble. At times, like if you tell me something, then I take it to the bank. And I think that that's where trust comes in. I'm big on core values. Respect, trust, commitment, and positivity are my core values. And with any organization I've been a part of. And so, respect, trust. So if you tell me you're going to do something, I trust you're going to do it until you don't. And then once you don't, then I'm going to bring you back to these core values and hold you accountable to those core values. And that's one of the biggest areas of growth for me, Chris, when I went from being, after I got let go at North Carolina, I went on my leadership journey. I used to, kind of get mad at players if they did something wrong. And then I kind of flipped it. I said, okay, what are our core values? And it was respect, trust, and commitment. At the time, I didn't have positivity. But a player one time wasn't going to class, so I called him in a conference room and I said, I hear you're not going to class, and his head dropped. I said, you signed this stone with our core values on it. And it was a limestone, and we used that as the foundation of our program. And it's had RTC on it with the team and the year. And I said, you signed the stone, and our core values are respect, trust, and commitment. Well, by not going to class, you're not respecting the education here at SMU. I don't trust you now, and you're not showing a commitment to the program and your education. And then I said, if you were me, what would you do? And I went old school on him, Chris. Instead of, I went like your parents would do, and generally you punish yourself harder than your parents would have. So he said, I would suspend me. So I suspended him, and I walked out of the office, arm in arm. And I thought that was one of the best moments as a coach for me in terms of my growth and representing my growth as a coach. And it was a very rewarding experience. I got my message across, and I'm sure he shared that with the team. And I think values driven behavior is much better than rules driven behavior.
I love that. I think that's so powerful, values-driven behavior. One of the things that we become really fascinated with in the past is how some people are actually turning off technology, and whether that's spending more time on themselves, their family, their friends. I was curious if you ever tune out technology or your cell phone and just focus on you, your family, friends.
I try to. I do. I'm not good at it. Um, the cell phone is a dangerous thing, like anything, any person, any company, your biggest strength, your biggest weakness. And the biggest strength of this phone is immediate communication, the bing that you hear, the vibration you feel, and that gives you that dopamine hit that makes you want to reach for it. So every once in a while, and I say once in a while, like if I go out to dinner with my family, I'll leave it in the car. Or I'll leave it in my office at home and go into the kitchen. Once in a while, I don't do as good a job as I'd like. I need to improve in that area.
No, I think it's something that in today's day and age, you hit it on the head. It's that dopamine rush. It's you grab it, and it's the fear of not knowing what's going on every second of the day. But as we've been doing these interviews, so many people have shared how when they tune out for 20 minutes, half hour, an hour, they just enjoy whatever it is they're doing, whether it's family, whether it's a workout, whether it's watching a TV show or something. And I just think it's important. And I hope as we continue with technology that people will use technology for what it is. And don't get me wrong, it's got some amazing abilities. But the reality, too, is I think it's important to put them to the side, and whether it's an hour, half an hour. But I appreciate you touching on that.
Yeah, no, it's a good reminder. And I think, by doing these podcasts, by talking to companies, by doing some training, a friend of mine said you preach the most what you need the most. And sometimes by preaching about leadership and Christianity and personal growth, just because I'm talking about it doesn't mean I don't need it. Like I need it. And so by talking about it, it kind of, I think, forms you know, helps form habits in your brain by talking about it and by reinforcing it. And then you say, okay, yeah, I can't be a hypocrite. I gotta do what I'm saying. other people should do. So it's a good way to reinforce good behavior.
No, I love that. So for our listeners who would like to connect with you or find out more about you and your leadership company, what's the best way for them to do that? And also, are you active on social media?
Yes, I am very active on social media. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on at Doherty Matt, at Doherty Matt. And I think that there's a website there that they can access, or they can connect through LinkedIn.
And then last question for you is, I wanted to see if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Yeah, I just encourage you to learn and grow. Again, that's kind of my motto for my leadership practice. I think that there's so much out there that we don't know, and to have an open mind and learn from others, whether it be people or books, and then to try to grow from it. And I think that our country needs that more now than ever before, because we're so divided with the Democrats and the Republicans, that if we can have an open mind in discussions across the aisle and recognize the good that the other people can bring to the table and come to some compromises, the world, our country, will be even a better place than it is.
I think that's spot on, and I could not agree more. As I think where we are today in 2020, it's fighting its negativity first and foremost, as opposed to sitting across from somebody and having open dialogue. So, Matt, I truly, truly appreciate it. I hope you and I can connect soon, and thank you again for being on the show. Thank you for listening to episode number 267. I love how Matt shared the importance of learning and growing. He easily could have become bitter after he was fired from the University of North Carolina, but instead, he decided to become better. In his parting words, Matt encouraged us to learn and grow. Great advice, especially as we are dealing with this coronavirus and social distancing. So with that in mind, I challenge everybody to use some of this time to learn and grow. Maybe it's a book, a course, or even possibly picking up an instrument. Challenge and push yourself during these difficult times. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.